We want to hear from the 11th chapter of St. John's Gospel. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died, but I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord. She replied, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. And after she said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. The teacher is here and is asking for you. And when Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. And when the Jews had been with Mary in the house comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. But when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come along with her weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? Jesus asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. And Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him? But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? Jesus, once more, deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. And take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there's a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days. And then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped in strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes, unbind him, and let him go. Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. The gospel, the good news of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. So we have again in this gospel story people who are seeing death of a friend, brother, a village, citizen. What they see is death, one who has been entombed, who has been bound, who has been judged and let go. And Jesus, in his response, acts in such a different way. He seems to see beyond the death. He sees in this an opportunity to prophesy, to proclaim to the people the promise of God for life. And this is a faith that Jesus carries all the way through, a faith that allows others to believe in him, just like the woman at the well. The people come to believe in God's power through the words of Jesus, through the proclaimed power of the word. We have a man bound, dead, and Jesus calls out for life. Lazarus, come out. It didn't take anybody's belief for life to return to Lazarus, for him to be raised by the power of God. But the people's response to this power, to this new breath within Lazarus that recreated him was significant. Jesus tells them as a people, unbind him, let him go, let him be free to live once again. This meant that they had to remove their judgments to see beyond what they had always thought about death as a curse. They saw instead the power and the glory of God and the freedom of that faith. So, we've been looking at these scriptures through the 12 steps of the journey that people in AA walk, and we have once again this week a way of understanding steps 9 and 10 through the characters in this gospel story. And we are reminded that step 9 says, make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So last week, Pastor Jerry helped us to think a little bit about what it means to reflect on our lives, to invite God to transform us in a way that we actually make a list of those people that we have hurt, that our addictions, that our stinking thinking has crucified, has brought pain and death to, those people that we have hurt because of our selfishness and our addiction to sin. To imagine that and to allow that Spirit of God to move us in such a way that we now, this week, consider what it would be like to go to those people and to actually say, I'm sorry. To acknowledge our brokenness, our sinfulness, our selfishness. To acknowledge that which we have chosen to engage in, and to invite God's breath to recreate us, that we might reestablish relationship in a good way by freeing people through our apologies, to free people, to give people an opportunity to say, I accept your apology, you're forgiven. But we have to be sober about this. Not everybody can hear an apology, and sometimes our coming back into people's lives and saying sorry could raise up or open up old wounds that they're not able to deal with. And we have to be very thoughtful and judicious and prayerful about how we say we're sorry. But to create that opportunity is significant. To let God transform us in such a way that we can see the possibility of that. And our 10th step, to continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. We're called into this ongoing reflection, self-consciousness that comes with living in the Spirit of God, being recreated in the Spirit of God. There's so many people who are addicted to substances, who live lives of sobriety but never come to a point of joy or freedom because they don't open themselves up or surrender themselves to the truly transforming power of God. That's what we're invited to do during this Lenten time, through prayer, alms, charity, through fasting, to give ourselves over to the needs of other people, to give ourselves over to the will of God, knowing that that is where our deepest truth, our deepest joy, our deepest happiness lies. That's where our new life can be found, is in that reconciliation. And so to practice reflection, to practice confession, to practice going to the people that we hurt as immediately as possible, to admit when we are wrong so that the power of God can recreate those relationships. That's what the 10th step of AA calls people into. That's what we are called to in our Christian journeys, in the power of God's breath and the power of Ruach. And so we can unbind people who are seeking freedom. We can unbind people that we have bound up and placed into the caves of death by our behaviors, by our choices, by our selfishness. We can unbind them by apologizing and creating a new space for life to emerge. That is our reality. That's the good news presented to us in this Lenten journey. And so I want to again come back to this prayer that we are invited to pray daily in this Lenten journey to strengthen us and guide us. And it's the Serenity Prayer, and I would invite you to pray it with me at this time. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking as Jesus did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen. You know, as I was reflecting this week, as actually on our travels, I went back to the Ash Wednesday. We began this Lenten journey singing day by day a song from Godspell, and I went back and listened to the soundtrack, and I was inspired again by one of the other songs on the soundtrack. I would invite you to look it up. It's By My Side, and it's sung by Kate Hanley. And if you look it up and find the original version of it, and know it's the story of Jesus and his disciples. But this song, By My Side, is really, I think, the good news of this message today, where we invite Jesus to walk with us as we allow ourselves to move through that pain, to dare ourselves to journey with Jesus in a good way. So listen to the song By My Side. Let it move in you. Continue to pray Serenity Prayer. And until we are able to be together again, peace to you and to your spirit.